taught is more or less about the history of geography. And as per the history of geography, it can be divided into three main eras. Medieval or the Middle Age geography, and then we have the Modern Age geography. Okay, and each of these eras have peculiar characteristics. The sort of things they did during each of those eras are somehow different, and they represent a little bit of improvement in each of them. Last week, for instance, I think so that we don't forget, and we can be up and doing with all of these things. Now, which geographer, okay, was the first to argue that the Earth was spherical or round? Which geographer was that? The first to argue or to state? Emmanuel Lamour says Plato. Emmanuel Lamour, you are correct for 3 points. Okay. Now, who then was the first geographer to find evidence to support the claim that the Earth was spherical? Emmanuel Lamour, correct for 3 points. Meshach also has his hand up. Meshach, what's your answer?
It's the same thing, Aristotle.
Aristotle. Thank you. Okay. Which other question can I get for you? Okay. So I want somebody to, in 30 seconds or in 1 minute, explain the concept of varying habitability. The concept of varying habitability. I want someone to do that for us. The concept of varying habitability. Let me see if I can find someone. Alligator Hamidou. Alligator Hamidou. If you are here, I want to hear your voice.
Hello, sir.
Oh, this voice is nice. Yes, go ahead.
Sir, I just joined the class. I don't know what you want me to do.
I want you to discuss or describe or explain the concept of varying habitability by Aristotle. Hmm.
Sir, can you please let someone else do it and then I'll do the next one?
No problem. Anybody, male or female, can anybody just explain the Aristotle's concept of varying habitability? Yes, anybody? As for this one, you can be about 50% sure something like this could come in your exam. So, Meshach, talk to us. Meshach, I think this is Meshach Entry, right? Meshach Entry, your hand is up, so kindly talk to us.
Hello, so please can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, Aristotle's concept of varying habitability deals with how he was describing the earth based on how accessible it is or how one can dwell in it. So he mentioned of three things. He talked about the frigid zone, and then he talked about the frozen zone, and then the temperate zone. Then based on that, he said the torrid zone is uninhabitable. That is a place where man cannot stay because that was close to the equator. Then he also mentioned that the frigid zone was always frozen and it was around the north and the south poles. But then he mentioned that the temperate zone is the areas where life can actually go on. I think something like that is what I remember.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly. You've done very well, Mesha. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Yes.
say.
Okay, so if you remember, it means we have about how many zones? We have about 5 zones. Okay, so one torrid zone around the equator. Now, this torrid zone is uninhabitable, as our big brother, Mr. Meshach, rightly said. It is uninhabitable because of its proximity to the equator. Okay, and the sun is almost vertically overhead, intense heat, so people cannot stay there. That was what he argued. And then he also said that there was a frigid zones or 2 frigid zones, one at the North Pole, one at the South Pole. These frigid zones were also uninhabitable simply because they were too cold for people to stay. Okay. Now we have how many? 3 zones. One torrid zone, 2 frigid zones. Now he also mentioned 2 temperate zones. Now these temperate zones were located in between the torrid zone and the frigid zone, either in the northern hemisphere or in the southern hemisphere. Okay, and these temperate zones were the zones that he argued that people were likely to be able to stay because temperatures were mild enough. They were not too hot, they were not too cold. Okay, that was what he argued. And remember the other name he gave to the temperate zone, he said he called it was the ecumen. Ecumen, is that right? Okay. Let's see if we can get one or two other questions. Okay. So Alexander the Great also came after Aristotle, and you know what he did, trying to spread geographic knowledge. Okay, remember the people that he traveled with, the documenters, the astronomers, and the pacers, and what each of them used to do. And you also remember the 2 things that he tried to achieve before he died, but he couldn't. Okay. Then we also came to arguably one of the most important geographers, Eratosthenes, who is said to be the father of geography. And we thoroughly explained the difference between who the Greeks thought was the father of geography and who the rest of the world thought was the father of geography. And the right answer to choose if it should come in an exam, for instance. Okay. All right. We also spoke about he being one of the first people to sort of develop a world map that had the north-south lines and the east and west lines, similar to what his students later perfected to be what the grids, the longitudes and latitudes, and what have you. Okay. Then, what he's best known for, the most important thing that he's known for, was his calculation of the Earth's circumference. And I took you through stage by stage, step by step, as to how he was able to do it. And we even went as far as talking about the errors that he incurred as to why he wasn't able to get the actual figure. Okay, remember his figure was just shot over a few miles. He calculated it to be about 25,000 miles, while the actual value was about 24,860 miles. And we explained where the distortions were. And then came Hipparchus, who was also the one who succeeded Eratosthenes at the Library of Alexandria, if you remember. Okay, and we even said that he was part of, he was more of a mathematician and an astronomer, even than he was of a what, a geographer. But one of the most important things that he's well noted for was his introduction of the grid system, the north-south lines and the east and west lines, the longitudes and latitudes. He was the one who perfected them. Okay, he was also the first person to sort of divide the Earth into 360 degrees. Okay, and what each of them, each of those longitudes and latitudes mean according to time calculation. All right, and he also provided 2 map projections. We also went ahead to talk about Posidonius and all that he did. Okay, but remember Posidonius was had a problem. His problem was one of his contributions was correct, one of his contributions was wrong. Ironically, it was the correct contribution that was actually and I gave you the explanations as to how all of those things came about. And then we ended with Strabo as the last Greek geographer. Was Strabo. But the first Roman geographer, okay, was Marcus Varro, and he came about the theory were more or less engaged in hunting and gathering, okay, and how we evolved from that stage to the stage of pastoral nomadism. Stage where people began to intentionally farm, and then to the modern stage of contemporary culture. We also geographer. He is the last classical geographer, Claudius Ptolemy. And we also gave several explanations as to Ptolemy. The fact that he was also merely a was that he was actually one of the people who accepted references would be made to. If anybody wanted to make a reference to anything, they would make reference to him because he was the last of the classical geographers. Okay, and if he had accepted the wrong calculation of the circumference of the earth, that would affect everything that anybody would do using his document. I hope that is made very, very clear. Okay, all right. And then we came to the medieval geography, where we spoke about the geography in the Christian world. And I took my time to explain an important thing to you, which, oh, someone says the line is breaking. Please, is everybody experiencing my line breaking, or it's more stable now?
Yes,
Yes.
sir. It's breaking.
Is it breaking?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. I hope this thing does not start today too.
So please, I hope it's stable now.
So I'm sure the network there is everywhere.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's clear now, sir.
Okay, so bear with me. Just as we did last week, if I go off, I'll try and come back. I'm still waiting for the remaining of your colleagues to join so that we can kick off. But then, one thing that I explained to you last week was the concept of the Dark Ages as synonymous to geography in the Christian era. Okay, who can briefly explain that concept to us? The Dark Ages. One person in just 1 minute. Explain. Anybody? The Dark Ages in geography. Mr. Reynolds, are you speaking? Nobody wants to speak.
Hello, sir.
Yes,
Hello, sir.
Ibrahim. Yes, Ibrahim, go ahead.
You said? Please, good morning. You asked
Good
a
morning,
certain
Mr.
question
Ibrahim.
about the Dark Ages of geography.
Yes.
The other time, Dark Ages refers to the period roughly 5th to 14th century in Western Europe, after the Roman Empire fall.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what I can say for now.
For now, okay, that's fine. You have just given the introduction to the Dark Ages. Anybody? I think Barbara, please go ahead.
I think you said that is the period where geographical knowledge was replaced with religious interpretations. At that
Mm-hmm.
period, when something happens, instead of people to go out and seek the physical evidence to explain what happened, they will rather look into the Bible to look for explanation to it.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the dark ages. And
Indeed,
so
indeed. Mm-hmm.
geographical knowledge at that time dwindled. It they lost it completely. There were no
Indeed,
new inventions at that time because people were following the Bible.
indeed, indeed. Thank you very much, Madam Barbara, for your contribution. Uh, in addition to that, remember that we argued that a lot of things also began to change. The
Yeah.
fact that uh, geographical writings also began to decline, mostly because people did not travel anymore. They were just mere compilers of information. Okay, and so the act of somebody going to actively seek information from somewhere, make experiments, as who Aristotle had argued or had advised people to do, people were no longer doing the same. Okay, and so it even led to another major drawback, which was the art and science of map making. As at that time, cast your mind back to the maps that people like Anaximander had drawn, people like Hipparchus and what's his name, Eratosthenes had drawn. Okay, among other people, and what the Christians at a point in time had started to draw. I think Barbara has her hand up again. Yes, go ahead.
So is that the time there were a lot of fighting going on between
Yes,
the Christians
yes,
and the Muslims, and it led
exactly.
to the burning of the Great Library?
Yes, exactly. All of those things put together form the explanations as to the decline of geographical knowledge. Okay, because geographical knowledge was stored at that time. They didn't have social media and the internet like we do today. Okay, everything was written down on paper, and those some of those papers were not even of quality material, so they wouldn't have the ability or the quality to last. Okay, and all of those things were stored in the library at Alexandria, or most of them. And the fact that because of the crusades and the wars and the fighting, many of these materials were lost. All of these things contribute as to the reason why we argue that there was a dark age of geography, especially within the Middle Ages. Okay, all right. Today, however, today we are going to look at uh, geography in the Muslim world. So let me break it down for you. The Middle Age geography, similar, you remember in the classical geography era where we had the Greeks, it was divided into two. We had the Greek geography and the Roman geography. In the Middle Age geography or the medieval geography, we have the Muslims, the Christians, and the Chinese. Okay, so the first one, classical geography, we had Greek and Romans. Middle Age or medieval geography, we have Christians, Muslims, and Chinese. Today, we are going to look at the Muslims and the Chinese as part of chapter 3. Now, we are going to find out today that the Muslims, in fact, at that point in time, had contributed much more to geography than the Christians did. The Muslims were the ones who actually did something substantial in terms of geography. Okay, let me take it a step back. Even in the Christian geographical era, if it happened, okay, part of the explanation you can give to the dark ages or the Christian era geography was that if it happened that you were somebody who was good, who was somebody who wanted to contribute something substantial, and your explanations could not be found in the Bible, initially your explanations will be rejected or your output will be rejected. If you persist, my brother, my sister, they can even go ahead to kill you because they will argue that you were a heretic. Okay, you are making claims which are not found in the Bible, which means that you were being influenced by the devil. Okay, but the Muslims, on the other hand, were people who were largely travelers, as we'll come to understand today. The Muslims were people who liked to travel, and so explains as to why, even though the Arabs or the Muslims found in the Middle East, okay, they were able to spread their religion as far as the northern part of Africa. As to why today almost the entire northern Africa is Islamic or Muslim. Okay, but let's go into it. Geography in the Muslim world. A major development in the medieval period was the spread of Islam. Muhammad, their prophet, who died in the year AD 632, founded the Islamic faith, uniting previously isolated Arabic tribes through the teachings of the Quran, the first book written in Arabic. So it doesn't mean that there was no there was nothing Arabic at that time or before. If you cast your mind back, the Christians among you would understand that Abraham, who is more or less the father of both, who is a patriarch of both Arabs and Christians alike, he gave birth to was it Ishmael or so, and he was the one whose lineage later gave birth to the Arabs. Okay, but as at that time, there were small isolated tribes who had settled in that particular area. It took one man called the Prophet Muhammad to bring all of these people together. Now, he did that through the teachings of the book of the Quran. Now, the Quran guided not only religious beliefs, so the Quran was not only a religious book, but also governance, commerce, family life, and explained natural phenomena, which the Muslims accepted as what? As truth. Why would we say governance is geographic? Why would we say commerce is geographic? Family life is geographic. Remember, in chapter 1, okay, always try to link things. In chapter 1, when we're speaking about the linkage between geography and the social sciences, okay, what can governance be linked to? Political geography. Governance can be linked to what? Political geography. Commerce can be linked to what? Economic geography. Family life can be linked to what? Social geography or sociology. You get the whole idea. And so the book was not only a religious book, it was also a book that had aspects of other disciplines in them, similar to the Bible. Okay, similar to the Bible. The Bible also has aspects that look at governance, commerce, and what have you. Is that okay? All right. Now, Quran, that it explained things to them. Moving on, the Islamic conquest began soon after Muhammad's death. 641, Egypt in 642, and by 732, Muslims controlled the Sahara and part of Europe. Remember, the Egyptians, for they had their peculiar religion. Okay, I've forgotten the name they give to that religion, but they had a peculiar religion. Okay, they worshipped the sun god, what they call the Ra. They are largely an Islamic country. Okay, but the Islamic ideas were spread through the conquest. The Islams were rather spreading through the conquest. If you remember what Alexander the Great did, that was a similar thing that the Muslims were also doing as at that time. Established as the intellectual center of the Muslim world. So you remember what the Library of Alexandria meant. So people of diverse capacity and share ideas. All right. Now, under the caliphs Al Rashad and Al Mamun, a vast translation project converted Greek philosophical and scientific works into Arabic. Okay, so the Muslims also started with translations. Scholars of all faiths were employed, and translators were paid by the weight of their manuscripts in gold. From Baghdad, new knowledge spread across the Muslim world and into Europe via Latin translations. One of the most significant innovations was the adoption of the decimal system introduced to Baghdad from the Hindu scholars who had received it from China, something we are going to talk about later in this particular slide. Okay, the contributions of the Chinese, they were the ones who developed the decimals, or even the importance of the number zero. Okay, so the more you want to create a number to be bigger, you add more zeros. As to why you have more zeros in millions than you have in thousands, or even in the hundreds, and they're similar to what we have in the billions. Now, Al Mamun also commissioned a recalculation of the Earth's circumference using Eratosthenes' method. So this is something like largely the first geographic thing that they actually did, trying to recalculate the circumference of the Earth. This was absent in the Christian geographical era. And they also had certain distortions as to why their figure was not as accurate. Now, the Muslims contributed to two main things. Okay, among other things, they contributed to two main things: climatology and geomorphology. Remember, climatology is the study of climate, which is done over a 30 currently studying it. All right. Now, they also contributed. Is there a hand up? Mr. Samuel, yes, you can go ahead.
Yes, sir. You made mention of decimals. I also learned the numerals we use.
Hello.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Yeah, I also learned the numerals we use in the modern era was also designed by a Hindu man. Is it the same thing as the decimal?
By what? They were designed by what?
A Hindu man. An Indian.
Inspiration was drawn from the Chinese. Okay. One thing that you must understand is that the Chinese civilization was a very major civilization in Eastern Asia. Okay. And in fact, they even existed before the Indians existed. The Chinese civilization was the one that birthed other civilizations like the Indians. And so, if the argument is that the Indians were the ones who brought up the decimals or the relevance of the number zero, it is most likely they got that inspiration from the Chinese. The only issue is that, as at that time, China was not accessible. China was not accessible because of it was divided, it was separated by the Himalayas. You know the Himalayas, right? Where you have the mountain Everest or the Mount Everest. Okay. And China was largely isolated. But the Indians, for instance, share a border, and so they had access. And you must also understand that the Indians were also colonized by the British. So if it happened that the British got to India and they realized that these people are using decimals for their calculation, where would they think they got it from? They would think they bet the idea themselves. But records show that the Chinese were the ones who actually started using the decimals before the Chinese did. Mr. Samuel, is that okay? I don't know if you can hear me, but I hope you do. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'm talking Arabic numeral, which is the one we use now.
Okay. So they are not so different. It's like the idea is that they borrow from each other. If you understood what we just said in the previous slide, you can see that it said one significant innovation was the adoption of the decimal systems. They adopted. If you are adopting something, it means it came from someone else. Okay, it was adopted. They adopted the decimal system, which was introduced to Baghdad from the Hindu scholars who had received it from what? From China. And so it was more or less a transfer of knowledge. One person copied it from the other. You remember the same thing that Tales of Miletus did, right? Tales of Miletus, after he traveled to Egypt, saw the priest working with some things and he copied it and then improved upon it. You understand? So it's the same idea. I hope that is okay. All right. Okay, let's move on. Now, as I was saying, the Muslims contributed to climatology and geomorphology. We know that geomorphology is the study of earth processes. Now, between the years 800 and 1400, Arabic geographic writings were more diverse and accurate than those of the Christian scholars, which is something that we have explained just now. Please, if you have your microphone on, try to mute yourself. As Muslims drew from Greek sources and first-hand travel reports. So not only did the Muslims copy or learn from the Greeks, they also had access to first-hand travel reports. As I earlier stated, the Muslims were largely travelers. They were largely travelers. One early explorer by name Ibn Hawqal traveled across Africa and Asia from 943 to 973. Okay, he observed thriving populations south of the equator, disproving the Greek belief that such regions were what? Uninhabitable. If you remember, as Mr. Meshach Intri earlier explained, the fact that Aristotle said the torrid zone was uninhabitable, primarily because it was too hot. Okay, but Ibn Hawqal was one of the earliest Muslim travelers who, after he had traveled across Africa, meaning that he had at least crossed the equator, realized that people were living in the place that the Greeks were saying people could not stay, which disproved the concept of what varying habitability. Exactly. Now, in climatology, a man called Al-Balkhi compiled the world's first climate atlas. The world's first climate atlas. An atlas is essentially a compilation of maps. So one person had taken the pains to compile the world's first climate atlas, which described the climates of various areas around the world. Okay, describing the climate or the average weather condition of a place calculated over a 30-year period of various places all around the world. Okay. In 921, using travelers' observations, so people who had traveled to different places came back and gave accounts as to what they experienced. Atlas. Okay, evaporation, condensation are two of the most important stages in the water cycle, and this was largely described by a man called Al-Masudi. In the year 985, another man called Al-Makdisi, okay, proposed dividing the world into 14 climate zones or regions, noting that climate varies by latitude and longitude. He also recognized that most land lies in the northern hemisphere. All of this we know to be true, especially the fact that there is more land in the northern hemisphere. Okay, as part of physical geography, you got to know the variations or in the distribution of land. In the northern hemisphere, there is more land than there is water. In the southern hemisphere, there is more water than there is land. Okay, this was first noted by Al-Makdisi. In the area of geomorphology, Al-Biruni, okay, observed that the stones in Himalayan alluvial deposits became rounded as they rode in streams, which is true because in also in as part of earth science. Okay, I'm sure you studied under chapter 2. You studied constructive forces and destructive forces, right? Yes. So you know that the constructive forces, they either shape or they create new things. They shape or they create new things like mountains and what have you. Whereas the destructive forces are the ones that would weather and then erode away. Okay, so that was what he was primarily trying to describe, the fact that the stones, when they move downhill, okay, through the river banks or through the rivers, the more they strike each other and they hit other objects, the more they become rounded. And this is true because when you go to the beaches, the sort of stones that you see are largely rounded stones. I think a hand is up. Mr. Ibrahim.
Hello, sir.
Yes, boss.
Sir, please, after the class, the slide for this particular, with all due respect, from this portion, the Muslim contribution.
Yes, you want us to what?
I'm pleading for the slide.
Oh, it will be given to you. You guys don't have the slides yet, because this particular slide has been shared already. There's chapter 3.
Okay.
I shared it with your course rep last week. So kindly contact him and everything will be made available. All right.
Okay, sir. All right, sir. Thank you.
All right. Moving on. How sediment texture. Another hand is up. Sir, please, the network is breaking. Can you all hear me clearly?
Sir, please, the line, it keeps breaking.
Yeah, it keeps breaking.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, for now it's stable.
Okay. Okay. He also recorded Hindu beliefs about lunar or early southern.
Breaking.
And how much the Muslims have contributed to. Largely nothing. Only translations upon translations upon translations. But the Muslims are going a step further to explain things, at least from the perspective of climatology, cloud formation, explaining climate, and also trying to do things in terms of geomorphology, explaining how rocks or certain stones become rounded as we see them along river banks and also along the beaches. Okay. Now, Ibn Sina, also called Avicenna, described valley formations by mountain streams and theorized that mountains are constantly eroded by water, with the tallest peaks being the most resistant to erosion. This is also true because we know that different rocks have different levels of resistance. Okay, there are certain rocks that are soft, and also because you either studied this in earth science or you are yet to study this in earth science, knowing that there are different levels of hardness to rocks depending on where they were formed. Okay, we know that diamond is the hardest mineral, and then talc is the softest as well. The same as rocks, there are certain rocks that are hard. And so as water rolls down or flows down from the mountain, okay, you realize that areas that the rocks are more hard or are more resistant, they take a much longer time for them to erode. Where the areas that the materials are loose and soft, you realize that these areas they can easily lose their formation, and then valleys can easily be formed. He also identified fossils in high altitude rocks as failed attempts without knowledge of Avicenna's work. We will go to a man called Idrisi or Al Idrisi, one of the most important Islam educated at the University of Cordoba. So at this point, you are beginning to see a little more modernity in the names and in the activities that people perform. Okay, at this time, at least there was a university, okay, where someone can go and study. He made major corrections to Ptolemy's geographical errors. Remember the numerous errors that Ptolemy contributed to geography. Okay, one of the people who tried to correct those errors was Al Idrisi. Now he was invited by King Roger II of Sicily to Palermo, a city in Italy. Idrisi was supported in his work by observers sent across the world to gather accurate geographic data. So once again, not only were the Muslims satisfied with the translations that they got from the Greek geographers, they also wanted to go a step further. And so at this time, what they were doing was to commission people. Okay, they would pay people, go to this area, go to that area, go and gather data and information and bring it back. Okay, that was what they were doing as at that time. And so their findings allowed Idrisi to compile a truly updated geography. This is also important again because always the geography of places are changing. The climate that you experienced some years ago will not be the same climate you experience now. And so there was a need for things to be regularly updated. If they were to be based on the sort of climate that the Greeks had explained or had chanced upon, then possibly they would still be going by the concept of varying habitability. But because they had then decided to take a step further to go and verify, to go and check for new things, they got to know that there were certain variations as to what the Greeks were saying and then what was there in reality. Is that clear? All right. In the year 1154, he completed a book titled Amusements for Him Who Desires to Travel Around the World. Was such an interesting title to a book, if you ask me. But then the title alone can make things even clear to you as to how deep the book was. Okay, so if you want to travel the world, this is the book you read. It will tell you about places, about things you can see. All right. Now, this book corrected misconceptions such as the Indian Ocean being enclosed and the Caspian Sea being the Gulf of the World Ocean. So, an aspect of this book was important to navigators or people who were involved in traveling by sea. Okay, people who were traveling by sea. This book was very much important to them. He also corrected the mapped courses of rivers such as the Danube and the Niger. Okay, these two rivers are some of the most important rivers in the whole world. But unfortunately, as at the times that the maps were being drawn, the course in which they flowed was a little distorted. He was the one who also corrected those things. You see how deep and how much the Muslims contributed to geography. Okay, correcting courses of rivers and what have you. Despite the significance, the book was not translated into Latin until 1619, and the translator was even unaware of Idrisi's identity. This particular statement, I want you to take note of very, very much, primarily because this is also one of the flaws of the Christian era of geography. If your book was not written in Latin, your book would not be regarded. Latin was the mode or the form of communication for the whole world or in the Christian world and wherever they dominated. And because they dominated much more areas than the Muslims did, before your book will be recognized to be of value, it must be written in Latin. Simple and short. Okay. And this was very bad because some people had written so many good books that were not accepted simply because they were not written in Latin. Is that okay? All right. So imagine someone writing a book in the year 1154. Okay, 1154. And it took almost 500 years for the book to finally be translated into Latin. 500 years. This will tell you how much retarded the the Christian era of geography was. Please, I hope some of these points you are writing down. Are you? Now, Palermo also became a center for navigational innovation. Coast charts, early forms of the Portolano chart were widely used. So the term or the objects or something we call Portolano charts, they are navigational maps. Okay, navigational maps where the sailors and the navigators on the boats and on the seas were using to tell direction and location. Okay, that was what we know as what the Portolano charts. Okay, and this was primarily developed by the Muslims or widely used by the Muslims. Now it is believed that the Genoese sailors, the Italian sailors, learned navigation from the Sicilians and passed this knowledge to the Portuguese, helping launch the age of exploration later in the centuries. Okay, so the Italian sailors were the ones who later taught the Portuguese sailors how to navigate or how to sail. And also, this is important because when we get to the next chapter, you realize that the Portuguese were one of the best navigators in the whole world. In fact, they were the ones who discovered what? Ghana, if you remember clearly. All right. But let's move on to another man called Ibn Battuta. Okay. If you can notice, you realize that it appears the works of individual Muslim geographers are not so much profound as to the in comparison to the Greek geographers. Okay, their contributions were small, 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 but put together, they made massive changes. Okay, or they contributed massively, and so much of these things you should be studying for chapter for section A. Okay, I am giving you tips. In fact, next week, which will be our last meeting, we have just one more slide. We'll do just chapter 5, and then the rest of the day or the time will be used to discuss the sample exam questions. Okay, all right. But let's move on to Ibn Battuta. Now, this man was born in the year 1304 in Tangier, which is in Morocco. Okay, so this man was an African. Now, he was born to a family of judges and he began his travels in 1325 with a pilgrimage to Mecca as at the age of what? 21. Always remember that during these travels, not only are they moving away or going somewhere for religious purposes, but they make certain stops, they observe certain things which they always documented. And this is what contributes to geography because the more you observe, the more you document, the more things you are adding to knowledge. Okay. While crossing North Africa and Egypt, he became more interested after exploring lands and cultures than studying law. After reaching Mecca, he committed himself to travel, deliberately taking different routes each time. So if it happened that he traveled to, if let's say in Ghana, he traveled to the northern region from Greater Accra, and maybe he used the Kumasi route. The next time he's going to the same place or he's returning, he will not use the same route that he used. He will try and use maybe even the Eastern Corridor route, okay, to get a different experience. All right. His journey spanned vast parts of the Muslim world, and he traveled through Arabia, the Red Sea, Ethiopia, and down the East African coast as far as Kenya, near the 10 degrees south. Okay, there he heard of Sofala in present-day Mozambique, confirming Ibn Hawqal's earlier claim that the torrid zone was populated and not unbearably Aristotle's concept of varying habitability, even among the Muslims. Okay, the first person was Ibn Hawkal, the second person is Ibn Battuta. These things to understand these things, if they hadn't traveled, if they had taken Plato's view of the world by or not necessarily finding explanations to his ideas, they would have just simply accepted Aristotle's concept of varying. In spite of that, they decided to even use Aristotle's own contribution. Remember, he said that travel and see, go and see. Okay, living by that law, they decided to go and check. Okay, and sometimes unconsciously they come across these things, and then they realize that what they had translated from was not true, because people were living as far as Mozambique. People were living around the equator, which the Greeks argued were what, or was what, the torrid zone. Exactly. Two people who had disputed Ibn Battuta's concept, sorry, and Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta, returning to Mecca, he journeyed to Baghdad, Persia, Black Sea, and the Russian steppes. So I, I don't know if I can try and visualize this for you, but this is quite a wide area for you to travel as a person. As one person, this is quite a wide area for you to travel. From North Africa, he traveled as low as far as Mozambique. Remember, at that time, they didn't have cars that we have today, or trains, or aeroplanes. They had to travel by walking, or either by horses or by camels. Okay, and if you are able to travel as far as these areas, this will even go to show the depth of your knowledge or your experience in terms of geography, right? Now, crossing Afghanistan, which means now he's even as far as the Middle East, okay, where he said, and he even reached India, which is in the southern part of Asia. This should tell you how far this particular man traveled. In fact, it is even argued that he's the one who had traveled the longest distance than anybody else at that time. Ibn Battuta is argued to be the one who had traveled the longest distance by any human being as at that time. Crossing Afghanistan, he reached India, where he served the Mongol emperor in Delhi. Appointed ambassador to China, delays him to first visit the Maldives and Sumatra before reaching China. So all these parts just simply go to explain the areas that he sort of what to visit. Okay, he says even later he traveled to Spain, where he was born, Morocco, to Mecca in the Middle East, came back to Africa, came to Mozambique, traveled all the way to back to the Middle East, okay, to somewhere in Europe, okay, to somewhere around Russia, came back to the Middle East. He even went as far as China, which is in the far east, okay, and then came back to Europe, came to the Sahara, and then to Timbuktu, which is somewhere around Mali area, okay, gathering insights on Muslim African tribes. So at that time, all right. Please, I hope everybody is following, and I hope you can all hear me clearly. All right. Now, Still on Ibn Battuta, but it goes off and comes on. Okay, I am back now.
Yes, sir.
Can you? I hope you cannot hear me clearly. Bab,
Yes, sir. You are
Say
back now.
the network is breaking off and on, and so we are getting the information piece. You hear one thing, it breaks
oh,
off, then you hear another. So we are now left with our imagination to connect the dots. We are not really getting.
okay. It's okay. Sorry for that, but let me ask, where did you last hear me to? So if I can pick it up back from there, where did you hear me to fully?
So it's breaking like word. You can hear one word, it will break. You not hear the other word. You hear the next one, just like that. So it's very hard to
Funny
even
enough,
make sense of it.
So I think you were talking about Ibn Battuta going to Spain.
okay, all right. Uh, Funny enough, last week when I was having, oh no, within this week on Thursday, I had a lecture with uh, my earth science students from Holy Child. Funny enough, it was not breaking up. So I wonder why. I don't know if there is someone here. I'm sure it is Angelito who is doing us. Angelito, are you the one doing us? Or who is the one doing us that our network is going off and on? Anyway, in order not to waste too much time, let me just quickly go over. So I was saying earlier that he had traveled widely all around the world, starting from Northern Africa to on his pilgrimage to Mecca, somewhere in the Middle East, came back to Africa through a different route, traveled through the torrid zone, okay, all the way to Mozambique, went back to uh, the Middle East, all the way to somewhere in Europe, okay, went as far as Russia, came back to Asia, into the Middle East, down to Southern Asia, where you find what? India, and then even went as far as China, which is in the Far East, okay, and returning back to Europe, crossing the Sahara Desert, where you have the northern African countries, and coming very, very close to West Africa, where you have countries like Mali, okay, all the way describing how far he had traveled, okay. Now, by 1533, he had settled down and he had tried to give a dictated account of all his travels, all the places that he went to. He gave an account of where he went to. So over a 30-year period, he had traveled nearly 75,000 miles, as I said earlier, which was a world record for the 14th century. This is quite a huge or a long distance to travel, because we know that at least the circumference of the earth is what, about 24,860 miles. Someone had walked a distance of what, 75,000 miles, almost about three times the distance. If that is not outstanding, I don't know what else would be. Okay. And it is not just about the distance he traveled, it is about the quality of the documents and the accounts that he was able to give out of those travels that he made. Is that okay? It's not just about traveling. As for the traveling, dear, almost everybody can travel. For instance, even in Ghana here, we hear of accounts of people walking all the way from the northern region to Accra. That is fine. But people like these, like Ibn Battuta, out of all those travel, they give accounts of what they saw, what they experienced, the culture of people, the climate, the vegetation, and all of those things contribute to geography. I hope at least that one, everybody was able to hear me very clearly. Great. Now, despite the significance of his journeys, his Arabic text had little influence on Christian Europe. And I want you to ask yourselves why. There's a big why there, because, once again, all his texts were what? In Arab. All his accounts were written in Arabic language. And as I said earlier, the Latin as a language was what was a medium of communication for the Christian world as at that time. And the Christians had primarily dominated almost every part of the world. And so, if your work was going to be valued, was going to be respected, it had to be written in Latin. But unfortunately, for people like Ibn Battuta, his text was written in what? Arab or in Arabic. Okay, and so the influence in the Christian world as at that time was very little. Even today, his observation that equatorial climates were milder than part of North Africa remains a valuable correction to long-standing misconceptions. Okay, so these people, as a result, were the ones who were able to then argue that the torrid zone was actually habitable. And in fact, they got to understand that the heat that we experience at the equator is even better than those they experience at in somewhere in areas closer to the temperate zone, which is where you find areas like Egypt and Morocco and Libya and Co. In those areas, they experience what we call extreme temperatures. So when it was hot, it is very, 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 very hot. When it is cold, it is very, 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 very cold. That is what we refer to as extreme temperatures. Okay. Whereas over here, we are in Ghana currently, we should be experiencing Hamatan. What are we experiencing? It is even raining. I don't know which part of the country you are, but where I am currently in Accra, it rained here yesterday. Okay. And so the torrid zone, as per the account of the Muslims at least, was actually habitable. And for the last time, they got to know this not because they sat somewhere and were discussing things over a bottle of champagne. No, they decided to go and check. They went ahead to experiment. They went to see for themselves. They commissioned people to go and check for them. And out of those travels came all of these outstanding observations that we got from the Muslims. So that ends the contribution of Ibn Battuta to geography. Okay, remember we started with the contributions of the Muslims to climate and or to climatology and geomorphology, where people like Al Masudi and Al Magdisi were compiling atlas of the world or climate atlases of the world. Some were correcting maps that were drawn by Ptolemy. People were contributing to geomorphology as to why some rocks are rounded and all of those things. Then we came to Al Idrisi and his contribution geography in terms of correcting the courses of certain rivers and also the encloseness of the Indian Ocean and that of the Caspian Sea. And the development or the usage of the Portolano charts. I explained to you that the Portolano charts, they are maps or charts that are used by sailors and navigators, people who travel on the ocean. Then we came to Ibn Battuta. Now we are at Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun. Now, he was a renowned Arab historian. We are knowing of contributing to geography. Okay. He spent much of his life in Algeria, Tunisia, and Spain, and also he later lived in Egypt. He completed the book called the Mukaddima, a profound introduction to world history that also addressed. But remember what a man called Herodotus said: all history must be treated geographically, and all geography must be treated what historically. And so, although he was sort of more of a historian, he was also inadvertently contributing to what geography. The linkages must always be there. Before his time, people were doing more of You are explaining earth processes, largely things that you can see and touch, similar to what earth science. Okay, but in human geography, what do? You are trying to explain human relationships and human interrelationships with the environment. So how human beings impact the environment and how the environment impacts human beings. Okay, this was largely started by Ibn Khaldun. Now he classified societies by stages of development, placing desert nomads as pure and self-reliant, while portraying urban dwellers as morally weakened by luxury. If you remember, as part of the Roman geography, someone did something similar. A man called what? Marcus Varro. Okay, he rather started with the stage of where people were largely hunter gatherers. Okay, where the virgin earth primarily gave people food. You don't have to farm. And then later the stage evolved towards pastoral nomadism. Okay, this is where he started. Ibn Khaldun started his classification. Exactly. Now he also discussed forms of government, social organization, economic activities, and city development. So, in contrast to the people who came before Ibn Khaldun, he is moving into more or less the social aspect of geography. He is not doing the physical geography that his predecessors were doing. He is doing more of what social geography or human geography. All right. Remember, government is synonymous to what political geography. Social organization synonymous to what sociology or social geography. Economic activities and city were shaped by Greek theories. He repeated outdated ideas such as the equator and the polar zones being uninhabitable and skin color changing with climate. So, once again, as opposed like Ibn Hawkal and Ibn Battuta had actually rejected aspect of that concept, Ibn Khaldun had accepted it. In fact, he even went a step further, claiming that you can change your skin color when you change your climate. So, for instance, people like us, people with the dark skin, when we move to areas like Europe or like areas in Australia, which are in the temperate zone, we could change our color and become white people. As to how he was able to come up with that explanation, I don't know, but that was his contribution. I hope I've not broken off and everybody can hear me clearly. Someone is already laughing. Yes, so that was a very strange contribution. In fact, this contribution is going to lead us into something we will discuss somewhere next week. Something we call the concept of environmental determinism, which is going to baffle a lot of you because let me not break the ice as at that time. So let's just take it easy. But he is by far the earliest or the first Muslim geographer to accept Aristotle's concept of varying habitability. I am taking my time to break down all of these because they are important. Someone says certain areas on the earth are uninhabitable. Okay, it is up to you to go and check. People who came before Ibn Khaldun had gone to check and had verified people were living in areas as far as Mozambique, which means that areas around the equator, which they call the torrid zone, was actually habitable. All right. Now, yet he emphasized the role of culture in shaping human traits. So the person that he is most synonymous to in the Greek era was Herodotus. Remember, Herodotus was the father of ethnography, which is the study of the culture of people. So Ibn Khaldun is doing something very similar to what Herodotus also did. Now, this made him one of the earliest thinkers to study human environment interaction. Human environment interaction. Also, next week when we meet, we will talk about another geographer in the modern era of geography who was the one who actually championed the human environment interactions. But the one who started it was what? Ibn Khaldun. Now, he is also often regarded as the greatest historical thinker of Islam and a pioneer of geographic reasoning in historical writing. So Ibn Khaldun was not one of the people who travel and go and check and come. No, he was more of a thinker. He was a theorist, someone who usually thinks about things, is a theorist. And who was the greatest Greek philosopher? Plato. You see how the linkages are. Okay, so always try to be, and it will help you to remember. Okay, let's move on. So that we've ended geography in the Muslim world. We've ended geography in the Muslim world, and at this time, we can all clap our hands for the Muslims and say, as at the time the Christians were doing geography bad, the Muslims were holding the forts down and were doing better. Madam Mary, your hand is up. Madam Mary,
Sir, please,
Madam Mary,
sorry. Sir, please, I'm sorry.
you wanted us to hear your voice. Okay, we've heard your voice. All right, that was just by the way. Let's move on. I hope at least we can all picture the trend, the various contributions of the Muslims. If not for anything, we can break it down into three parts. The first part of the Muslim contributions was in the form of uh, the contributions to climatology and geomorphology. Okay, Al Masudi, Al Makdisi, and their cronies. Okay, then the second part we look at contributions in terms of navigation. That one was primarily done by Al Idrisi. Okay, Al Idrisi, correction of the charts and all, or introducing the Portolano chart and what have you for navigators and sailors. Please be writing certain things down. Okay, contribution of Al Idrisi by introducing the Portolano charts and correcting certain navigations and what have you. There's a hand up again.
Yes, sir. Sir,
Madam Mary Sanders.
yes, please. You said that we can group the Islamic historians into three forms. The first one I couldn't get it, but I got the second one. That's the contribution in navigation.
So
But the first one,
okay.
thank
So
you.
in order, this is just for you to be able to study them or read them and understand them better. So to make it easier for you, you can group the Muslim contribution to geography or the Islamist contribution to geography into three forms. You can have one or the first part being the contribution to climatology and geomorphology. You have various geographers in there, Al Masudi, Al Makdisi, and their people. Okay. The second aspect you can state it as the contribution to navigation or maps or charts, which was largely pioneered by um, Al Idrisi or Idrisi, and you remember all that he did over there. Then the third part, you can state it in terms of the contribution by travelers. Okay, and these people and their, I mean, the travelers and the historians. So let's put it travelers and historians. Okay, and you have over there, you have people like Ibn Battuta, you have Ibn Khaldun, and who else? Who else is over there? Uh, yeah, I think Ibn Battuta and then Ibn Khaldun. They are the main people under the contribution to the travels or traveling and then history. Okay, so this will make it a little easier for you. But even under the Muslim contributors, okay, there are people that you can identify and say this person there, the way he has contributed, it is likely this person can easily come in an exam. For instance, you can study Ibn Battuta. Ladies and gentlemen, I am not saying that he will come in the exam. So that if he does not come, then people will come and be attacking me that I say he will come. No, I'm just saying, at least per his contributions, okay, It is so much that you can argue that, well, this person could easily come in an exam. Okay, so try and study Ibn Battuta. You can also read around Ibn Khaldun, maybe Al Idrisi. Okay, but a little more attention to Ibn Battuta. Okay, all right. So that was geography in the Muslim world. Remember, in the medieval era of geography, as we are doing in chapter 3, we have three main people. Okay, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Chinese. Let's look at geography in the Chinese world. Now, while geographic study advanced in Greece, Rome, and Christian Europe, as well as the Muslim world, and even the Scandinavia, you know where Scandinavia is in Northern Europe. China developed as an independent and major center of geographic knowledge. So, as I said earlier, after one of your colleagues, I think Mr. Ibrahim asked the question, in China they developed as an isolated country because there was largely no way of people reaching them directly, especially the Europeans. And remember, the Europeans were the ones who largely documented. They were not able to reach the Chinese areas early enough. There wouldn't obviously be any contributions documents. Okay, so much of what we know about the Chinese, we got to know after access to them had what improved. Because once the Chinese, the terrain is very harsh. Okay, numerous mountains, numerous rivers, and the people were also quite hostile. Okay, it says that although largely isolated from Europe, both civilizations showed remarkable parallels in geographic thoughts, suggesting some level of in. The Europeans didn't have direct contact with the Chinese. They would have access to the Chinese geographical ideas through people like the Middle East, people like the Muslims or what the world knows about the Chinese geography and Arabians. Now, from the 2nd century BCE to the 15th century CE, China enjoyed the world's highest standard of living. And the quality of people and develop the decimal system. So, which is used today in terms of commerce and economics and even mathematics. Okay, and as we are getting to know today, at least we know that it was developed by who? Chinese mathematicians, and they largely passed this to the Hindus, who later introduced it into Baghdad around AD 800. Okay, now the Chinese philosophy differed from Greek thoughts. Individuals were seen as part of nature, not separated from it, and there was no concept of a law-giving deity. This statement is also very profound. Why? The Greek geographers, as at that time, if you remember, we were treating the first lecture. Okay, we said that the three major geographic questions: where is it, what is it like, and what does it mean? The what does it mean question, they were trying to understand orderliness. And as part of that process, they saw the world as being ruled by deities like gods, where the Greeks had people like the Zeus. Now, the idea was that these gods or these deities were the ones who gave law to people. Okay, so if you go contrary to their laws, you will be punished, usually after death. So if you died and you lived a good life, there will be rewards. If you died and you lived a bad life, you go to Hades and then you face your punishment. Okay, but in the Chinese world, they saw human beings as part of the natural world. Okay, so we were not different from animals or plants. Then you met with nature. So you form part of the soil that plants will then use to give food and use to other human beings. You understand? And so human beings were not separate from nature. We were not independent. We were part of, absorbed into the universe, not rewarded or punished in an afterlife, as compared to that of what the Greek philosophy. Now, there was an important Chinese philosopher called Confucius, who is very, very famous. Now, he is a Chinese philosopher and educator and lived during the spring and autumn periods of Chinese history. His teachings emphasized morality, proper social relationships, justice, sincerity, greatly influencing Chinese culture and other Asian what, societies. All of these teachings that he emphasized can all be grouped into an aspect of geography. Okay, all of these things can be grouped. And so I know that prior to this course, many of us were seeing geography as the capital cities and towns. And no, it goes way beyond that, at least from the geographic thought perspective. Now, what are certain important Chinese geographical contributions? Chinese geography focused on accurate observation. Accurate observation. As a man like Idigo, okay, they relied on what accurate observation, not just observation, but accurate ones, and detailed inventories, meaning that they were people who like to take a stock of what they knew. All right. Notable achievements include one, weather records dating back to the 13th century BC. Okay, so which means that they were documenting meteorology. They were doing meteorology because meteorology is largely the study of weather or the atmospheric condition of a place. Okay, so being able to document weather means that you were inadvertently doing what? Meteorology, which is part of what? Geography. Now, a 5th century BC survey of the nine provinces describing soils, products, and waterways. So also in the 5th century BC, China was around that time divided into 9 provinces, or for the lack of a better word, states. Okay, whereas similar to what we have in Nigeria, okay, there are provinces in China. And as far back as the 5th century BC, they had documents describing the soils. So areas that were important or were possible for agriculture and other activities. And also waterways. Remember, China has one of as a country, has one of the most river bodies in the whole world, if not the one with the highest number. Okay, and so it was important for them to map their waterways, because as at that time vehicles had not been developed. Travel was either by horses or by water. Now, they also had river silt measurements as far back as the 2nd century BC, and they had also conducted the world's first population census in the year AD 2. The world's first population census in AD 2. So, which means that the Chinese geographers were advanced, or the Chinese in general were much advanced, because at least, if not for anything, they got to know the relevance of knowing the total number of people in your country at a particular point in time. Okay, so that if not for anything, when you are going for war, you know that you have this number of men in your country. Okay, if you had to rely on agriculture, you know the number of your population that were farmers. All of these things were captured as part of what their population census. And remember what a census is: the periodic head count of people living in a particular area at a particular time. The Chinese were the first to do that. There were also people who invented paper as we use today. Paper was invented by the Chinese. Printing of books were invented by the Chinese. Rain gauge or snow gauge to measure precipitation, rainfall, and snow was invented by the Chinese. And wonderfully, they were the ones who also invented the magnetic compass. So whereas the Greek geographers some time ago, if you remember, as at the time of Homer, they were using what the winds and the stars in the sky to tell the direction and location. The Chinese had developed what the magnetic compass, which is a tool or largely one of the most accurate tools for navigation. All right. The Chinese also understood the hydrological cycle by the 4th century BCE. Imagine, as at that time, they understood that the sun's energy in contact with the earth would eventually evaporate water, okay, from water bodies or from plants in the process known as what evapotranspiration. This will later be condensed in the atmosphere to form clouds. Okay, this will fall back as rain through precipitation or as part of precipitation, and then they would infiltrate the soils and then either fall back, join underground water storages, what we call the aquifers, or they will flow down and join the lakes and the rivers or the ocean, and the process starts again. The Chinese, as at the 4th century BCE, had understood the hydrological cycle. All right, let's move on. Now, the Chinese geographical writings, they were not only were they people who did all of these things, but they were also people who like to document stuff. And so they wrote a number of books, and the books were of 8 major kinds. They didn't write 8 books, but the books they wrote can be classified into 8 groups or categories. Number one, they had the studies of people, which we might describe as human geography. So they knew that different locations or different areas had people living there with different characteristics, different traits, and cultural activities. And so they had writings or documents that were attributed to such things. Secondly, they had descriptions of the regions of China. Remember, China as at that time was divided into 9 provinces. Okay, and each of them were headed by different kings or rulers or emperors at that time. They had books or documents that described all of those areas, whether it was in terms of climate, in terms of vegetation, or whatever. They also had descriptions of foreign countries because at a point in time, people began to bring them information of accounts from other areas. So they had writings of other areas. We also had accounts of travels, books about Chinese rivers, and so on and so forth. So the Chinese also contributed massively to geography. But as I said earlier, because China was largely inaccessible to people who documented history, much of what we know about the Chinese is information we got from other sources or indirect sources. Is that clear? All right. So this ends the medieval era of geography. Okay, remember the medieval era of geography is divided into 3. We have the Christian, the Muslims, and the Chinese. Okay, the Christians did largely very little. Okay, or close to nothing. Okay, and it is even in their era that we describe as the dark age of geography. And today, at least, we've fully explained what all of that entails or means. Then we came to the Muslims, and we got to know that contrary to what the Christians were doing, the Muslims were actually doing something quite profound. Okay, in terms of contributions to climatology and geomorphology, contributions to the development of maps and corrections of already existing maps, and then contributions to history. Okay, and then we came to the Chinese, what they did through the development of or the conducting the documenting of their soils and what have you, and all of those other things. So that sums up the contribution of the medieval era. Okay, so let me ask a question. At this point, comparing the classical geographers, the Greeks and the Romans, to the medieval geographers, the Christians, which era would you say contributed more, and why? Why? If you state it, why?
So please, we didn't hear the question well.
So there was a breakage.
Pages in your question, so we couldn't get you.
Oh, okay. So I was asking, with juxtaposing the classical geographers and the medieval geographers, okay, who would you say contributed more to geography?
Okay, so in my view, I would say that the classical geographers did a lot in terms of geography as compared to the medieval era. I would say that the classical geographers did a lot of work, and then that have brought us today to today's geography. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. In my candid opinion, I think the Greeks writers or the Greek geographers did far better as compared to the medieval writers. The reason being that you realize that the medieval writers were just building up on what have been written already. They were just only contrasting or adding to what has already been established. So the Greeks did much of the work as compared to the medieval writers. Thank you.
Okay. Barbara, your hand is up. Thank you, Mr. Maxwell.
So I will also go for the classical geographers.
Mm-hmm.
So I think whatever the medieval geographers are doing, they are just building up upon what the Greeks and the Romans did. So I'll
Okay.
go for. So I just think when it comes to the medieval geographers, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
the Chinese that have quite a unique contribution.
Why would you say so?
So upon what I just heard, I just think the Chinese are unique. Like,
Okay, that's fine. I think let me go to the comment section. Emmanuel Santos says the classical geographers did well, they set the pace. Emmanuel Amwa rather says medieval. Okay, Emmanuel, let's hear from you because you are the only person who is saying the medieval geographers did better. So can you explain to us why? Emmanuel Amwa, if you can hear us. Okay, Emmanuel don't want us to hear his nice voice. But anyway, Victus Kofi also says classical geographers did more because they started and paved the way for medieval geographers. Okay, that's also good. That's also good. Barbara.
so I also think the medieval geographers also did well because after the classical geographers came the Dark Ages.
Mm-hmm.
And so literally all the knowledge the classical geographers gathered was lost or nearly lost.
Mm-hmm.
So the medieval geographers, if they did not come in, geographical knowledge would have been wiped off.
Okay, so
So the medieval geographers came in to like bring back geography. So I don't know if that makes sense. If they did not step in, geography would have been gone. So they equally did well.
okay, that's true. That's very, very true. Thank you very much. Meshach, talk to us.
Yes, I also believe that the medieval geographers, precisely the Muslims, they did
Mm-hmm.
so well in bringing enlightenment to geography. Because if you look at some of the things they did, though the classical did well, but they had a lot of errors in their work. But when you look at the medieval geography, that is the Christians, they traveled a lot. The Muslims, they traveled a lot, and then they were able to bring more of accuracy. For instance, in the presentation, you talk about it being Batuta. If you look at the distance he covered, all because he was looking for accuracy. Has it not been that, would have been accepting errors from the classical geographers? So I believe the medieval geographers brought more light to geography in our dispensation.
That's very, very good contribution you made. All of you, you are all right. Alligator Hamidu, you are just clapping. You don't want that. You don't want to. No problem. Thank you very much, all of you. The idea is that as to who contributed more or who contributed less, well, the argument can always be made. It is all about perspective. It is all about perspective. They're almost the same thing as I asked you when we were arguing about Plato and Aristotle. Okay, it is all about perspective. Okay, so we will not dwell so much. I just wanted to know what you all thought, and everybody has a good idea as to who did better at what time. The time now says it is 8:46. 8:46. I don't want us to go for a break today because if we go, people will not come back. I am recording 96 people as at now. If we go on break now, half of the class will go and sleep. They will not come back. So, in order not to waste time, we would go on. But I must emphasize that the fourth chapter that we are going to look at now, it is a very interesting one, or at least I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. It is more or less the aftermath of the medieval era of geography. Okay, it is not the same. It is what the interest that the Muslims and the Chinese and the Christians brought that sort of birthed this era. So that is why it is not a main era on its own. It is more or less a sub era or an intermediary era between the medieval era of geography and the modern era of geography. Okay, and it is known as the age of geographical exploration and discoveries. The main idea behind renaming it this is because as at this time or prior to this era, remember the Dark Ages had more or less closed the door, released the curtains on geography, and so geographical knowledge had dwindled, had declined, as Madam Barbara would like to say. Okay, and so it took a high level of interest, curiosity, and other means for geography to reach its former height. Okay, and other improvements to be made. Also remember, the Greeks, for instance, were people who did not like to travel so far away beyond their borders. Okay, the Christians, well, much of what they did was also securing their trade routes and their pilgrimage routes. The Muslims also did what they could do. The Chinese were largely isolated. Okay, but in the age of geographical exploration and discoveries, suddenly the need and the curiosity of people to know what existed in different parts of the world was the talk of the day. Okay, people just wanted to know other areas, and you will get to know that it is around this time that many other African countries, aside those in North Africa, were discovered. A country like Ghana was discovered in this age of geographical exploration and discoveries. A country like America was discovered in the age of geographical exploration and discoveries. Okay, so this particular era is a very important period in geographical discussions. Okay, and we are going to understand why. Okay, so the age of geographical exploration and discoveries There was a sudden increase in exploring activity in Europe in the 15th century. A hand is up again. Who's on this up? The courses should kindly share the slides. Okay, so this slide, your courses don't have it yet. They have it up to chapter 3. Okay, but regardless, the course reps or whoever has the slides, please forward it to all your groups so that everybody can get access. After this class, I'll make the chapter 4 available to you. All right. Lambert,
Thank you,
thank
sir.
you.
Hello, sir.
All right. You're welcome.
Hello, sir.
Yes, Bismarck. Or
Hello,
that's EMS. This is Joshua
hello,
Martin,
sir.
right?
Yes, please.
All
Sir,
right.
actually, some of our colleagues also put their notes on the slides, aside the slides that you give, they write the notes on their machine. So sometimes if we get the slide before the lectures, it helps a lot. As we put comments on the particular page of the slide in which you are.
Okay, so that you can be able to study before the class will start. That is fine. The only
Yes,
problem is that
as we're studying now. Okay.
okay, I understand. The only problem is that some of your colleagues, when they get access to the slides, the class they won't come. Unfortunately, that's what some of your colleagues will do. So the best is to make it available after the
Okay,
class.
sir.
So
Let's
I
continue.
understand your grievance, but kindly bear with us. Thank you, sir. All right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Moving on.
Bye-bye.
There was a sudden increase in another hand is up again. Who is that? Okay, Michael Asante says some of us don't have any slide. So please try to forward chapter 1 to date. Thank you. Okay, so for the last time, all those who have access to the slides, post them on all your platforms. I understand around this time you are doing both. We are having a class of both social science and social studies. So whichever group you belong to, please, whoever has a slide, make it available. It is rather unfortunate I can't drop it on this platform as we are speaking. So it is on WhatsApp and it's circulating. So try and get access to them. Mr. Joshua Mate, kindly put your number on the platform once again so that those who need them can contact you. All right, thank you. Okay. There was a sudden increase in exploring activity in Europe in the 15th century, and
Okay, sir.
this was
Okay,
a
sir.
major turning point in world history. Okay, sorry for my network. All right. Now, in China, exploration supported by the emperor ceased after the seventh expedition of Chen Ho. Also, there was no great Muslim traveler after Ibn Battuta in the 14th century. Okay, so in various parts of the world, explorations had ceased. The Muslims didn't have any major traveler after Ibn Battuta, and we know who Ibn Battuta was, at least from his numerous travels. Okay, but in Europe, exploration for the first by government or by merchant companies, and for the first time was directed to the open oceans. So prior to this era, and I geographical explorations, more people traveled independently or they were financed independently. So someone will travel simply because to go and buy spices from another country, or simply because a person wants to go and explore on his own. Okay, but around this time in Europe, I want to go and explore this area in your name. I want to go and check the lands that are further away in your name. And so the king will then grant the permission and give him some amount of money, okay, and some goods as well to go.
The line has break again.
I think he's totally off now. I cannot hear anything.
You are not the only one. We cannot hear.
Let's all wait till he come back. Let's all wait patient.
Let's wait patient for him.
Apologies for my network interruption again. Oh, sorry, I projected the wrong. I hope my network doesn't mess up till we end the class. Let's see. If we are here. Okay. I hope you can now all hear me clearly.
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. So there are a number of reasons as to why exploration suddenly became the talk of the day or the major activity in Europe. Yes.
Sir, please, I can't see the screen. Okay. I can now see. Thank you.
You're welcome, Madam Clara. All right. There are a major number of reasons as to why suddenly explorations became the talk of the day. Number one was the urge to find out what it is like somewhere else. So, which was largely a curiosity reason. So, people just wanted to know what was existing somewhere else. We always say there's America, 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 there's Australia, there's China. But where is it? How do we even get there? And so people just decided to get to know. Okay, so that was the urge to find out what it is like somewhere else. Simply more or less a curiosity driver. So curiosity was driving, just wanting to know what was existing somewhere else. Secondly, the zeal to spread the Christian faith. Okay, this was another reason as to why exploration suddenly became important or the major activity. Remember, the Christians in the Bible know that Jesus Christ commissioned his disciples to go and spread the Christian faith. Okay, and so the Christians at that time saw it as their mandate, their responsibility to go and spread the Christian faith, to go and spread the word of God to the rest of the world. And so part of the reasons why they decided to start exploring. And also because at least as at that time, they got to know that, okay, so the torrid zone that they were saying that people are not there, the people are actually there. And if they are there, it is our duty to go and spread the word of God to such people, right? Next was the critical need to replenish the European supplies of precious metals and spices. Okay, now this is important because as at that time, currency was not in use. Money as a tender was not in use. Okay, what they were dealing in was what? In gold and in silver and in spices. So, for instance, is there a hand up again? Okay, all right. For instance, major wars that were fought in Europe at that time were paid for in gold or in precious metals. For instance, if Germany goes to fight Austria or Netherlands or another country and they lose, that country would then the one who lost to pay back what they have lost in money. And so they will pay back in what? In gold. The problem was this. They had exploited all their gold reserves and all their precious metal reserves. And so there was a need for them to go and replenish what they had lost. They had used up every other thing. At that time, if you want to conduct any activity similar to what we do today with our money, if you want to go and buy land, now that we even price land in Ghana in dollars, okay, at that time, they priced them in gold, in other precious metals. A typical example was what happened to Judas. Okay, after he had betrayed Jesus, what did he use the money for? To go and buy a piece of land. Okay, and so land, other major resources or other properties were purchased through these precious metals. Now, they had exploited almost all of their precious metal reserves, and so there was the need for them to go to other places to go and get more of these resources. Okay, cast your mind as to how the barter trade system began in West Africa and in Ghana. Okay, so they will bring us mirrors and guns and what have you, okay, and other spices, and we will give them our gold, and they will take away. You understand? So what do you think they were doing at that time? They were trying to restock or replenish all their inventories that they had lost over time. Exactly. Now you are also seeing spices here. The spices you are seeing here are different spices than the ones the women used to cook. As at that time, spices were of that much importance and they were very expensive. Okay, and so there was the need for them to restock all of these things that they had lost over time. So these are the three main reasons why there was a sudden increase in exploration activity in Europe. Okay, the urge to find out what it was like somewhere else, curiosity, just wanting to know, the zeal to spread the Christian faith. Okay, and you also know that it is through those means that colonization came to Ghana. And in fact, as a matter of fact, many of the schools that we have today are mission schools, the Catholic schools, the Methodist schools, the Presbyterian schools, the EP schools, and many others. Hospitals, the same thing. Okay, all of these things as a result of what? The spread of the Christian faith. Madam Barbara, your hand is up.
So were they not also trying to conquer other lands so that they will have other lands like under them?
So that would be a reason, because none of them will actually just accept that that was the reason why. And to be frank, if you think about it critically, nobody has just the urge to go and conquer. The idea is that you would conquer after you've gone to a place and found out that the people have a lot of what you need and you have to take it away from them. And the best way to take it away from them is to colonize them and then use a nice system and a nice strategy to take it away from them. Okay, and so that is why colonization is not merely a major point. Colonization is more or less an aftermath of what happened. So they came here spreading their Christian faith. Okay, and then realizing that, oh, these people, they have all of these things in abundance. These people need someone to lead them. What do we do? Let us colonize them. Let us find a way of channeling their resources to ourselves. And then the colonization started. Madam Barbara, are we okay?
So I feel like some just colonized some people to expand their territories.
Well, you can also argue that way. I wouldn't say it is wrong, but the idea is that before you even get the idea that a place is worthy enough to be placed under you, it means that you must have already gone there. You must have checked that these people have the necessary things that you need. Because if you go to a place and the place is largely a desert, or it is uninhabited and there is nothing productive over there, what would even influence you to put that place under you? No, everybody would like to get dominance of a place that has value. You understand? What is the value we are talking about? The value in terms of these precious metals, in terms of labor. Okay, you go there. Take for instance, let me give you an example. If these people came here and they realized that We had well sophisticated systems of governance where, and we had the same level of weapons that they had. Do you think it would have been so easy for them to take over us? No. But they came here and we were hospitable. We had our systems all right, but we were hospitable. We were trading with them easily. We didn't even know the value of gold as at that time. Because if we did, they wouldn't have taken them away in such large quantities. We wouldn't have been trading salt and mirror and gun for gold. Okay, but that does not also take away the fact that colonization was, somewhere embedded in there. It was somewhere embedded in there. So that point is also very well noted. Madam Barbara, thank you very much. Okay, so these are the three main reasons why exploration started in Europe. Kindly give me a minute to pick a call. Yeah, also. Try and finish chapter 4. Chapter 4. Yeah, so finish that one up and it's there. So next week we'll do chapter 5 and then we call it a day. Yeah, unless I communicate with Prof and find out we have to do another chapter. But for now, chapter 5 is where we end. Yeah. Easy. Right now I did teach, so you make a finish and then I'll get back to you. I hear you. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. Another tutor was asking for where to end. But then chapter 2 alone is like 3 different chapters put together. Okay. Geraldina, yes, your hand is up.
Sir, please, I didn't hear the third point.
The third point.
Yes, please.
The third point, the supplies of precious metals and spices. Is that what
Please
you're
come
saying?
again. You said the first one it was curiosity, the second one was zeal to spread Christian faith. The third one I didn't hear
The
you.
third one is to replenish the European supplies of precious metals and spices. Okay. All right. Are we clear? All right. Now, exploration around Africa to India and beyond. Between 1444 and 1448, ships sailed along the African coast, and 900 Africans were sent abroad to be sold as slaves. Okay, so this was around the time that the Europeans came to Africa and to Ghana in particular. But ladies and gentlemen, I for one, I disagree with this figure. I for one disagree with this figure of 900 Africans, because in Ghana alone, Nigeria alone, all of these countries put together, there is no way it was just about 900 Africans that were sent abroad to be sold as slaves. But that's just by the way. Now, the business of exploring was forgotten. Okay, I've forgotten who asked the question. The business of exploration was forgotten in the rush to profit from the capture and the sale of slaves. So as I was saying, colonization was not a major opportunity for them or an idea for them for which they embarked on. No, they came here and realized that we were just here, we were not well organized as people, at least according to their standards. Okay, we were strong, we had enough qualities to work on farms for a long time. Okay, and as a matter of fact, we were already engaging in the slave trade. History will tell you this. African chiefs and kings were already in the business of slaves before the Europeans even came. Okay, so what happens? You've heard of the slave raiders, right? What happens is that a ruler would commission, a king will commission some people, slave raiders, to go into the wild, to go and capture people and bring to us as slaves. Okay, and so they'll go and they will sometimes they buy them from people. Sometimes they just capture people and then they sell to these kings to be used as slaves. The Europeans came around and they saw that, well, this is what these people are doing, and it was very lucrative as at that time because you pay so little and this person can go and work on your farm for you for a long time. All right, I know some of these things may not be in the regular social studies books that we have, but this is the truth. Someone says, sir, don't you think they had a change of mind from their main course of exploration? Exactly my point. Exactly my point. So they didn't start with colonization as a main idea. It became an afterthought after they had arrived and realized that conditions were lucrative for such activities to go on. And so they then began to do the slave trade on the international scale. That is why we call it what? The transatlantic slave trade. Do you get it? And so it is not because slave trade was already in existence before they came. But they came to bring it to do it on a larger scale by exporting or taking away natives to other areas, especially the Americas and other parts of Europe, to be used as slaves. All right? Okay. Now, the Guinea coast was explored in 1455 and 1456, and the Cape Verde Islands were what visited. Although Prince Henry the Navigator, who you know already, died in 1460, the work he started was carried on after a pause, and new voyages were sent southward. In 1473, a Portuguese ship crossed the equator without burning up. This statement is funny. It's very funny, but it is very important as well. Because once again, the concept of varying habitability, around the equator, temperatures are simply too high for people to stay there. And so the idea is that anything there would instantly burn. And so a Portuguese ship of European origin, okay, remember, these people are not Greeks, these people are not Muslims, okay, these people are Europeans, a Portuguese European. Their ship eventually crossed the equator without burning up, emphasizing that what the torrid zone was actually what habitable. All right. Then a few years later, the Portuguese went ashore and set up stone monuments to indicate their claim to the African coast. So this was where the settling actually began, where they eventually began to settle on various coastal areas around Africa, especially West Africa. Okay, and they said wherever they go, they set up monuments. So it could be a castle, it could be a fort, it could be a monument to indicate that we were the first person to come here. And that was something that almost all of them did, because as at that time there was more or less a race to capture areas. And so wherever you get to, you indicate your claim by building something to alert any other person who comes around that a higher media, I am the one who first came here. Is that okay? All right. Now, in the year 1486 to 87, a man called Bartholomew Diaz sailed southward from the equator, meeting headwinds and a north-flowing current. To avoid stormy weather, he sailed far out westward away from the land, and only when the weather improved did he return eastward. He came upon the coast of southern Africa at Algoa Bay. Returning, he passed Cape Agulhas, and that's the southernmost point of Africa, somewhere in southern Africa, and then the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. Now, an important traveler or navigator around that time, whose name we've heard of a lot, Vasco da Gama. Now, the great voyage of Vasco da Gama took place between 1497 and 1499. Now he made a wide circle out into the Atlantic before turning eastward along the latitude of Cape Agujas. He then followed the east coast northward to Mozambique, where for the first time in these waters, the Portuguese came into contact with the Arabs. So this is a picture of Vasco da Gama and where he set out from. So this is it. You can see Portugal somewhere around here. And they sailed all the way to this side, the Cape of Good Hope over here. Then they went to Mozambique, okay, where, as the literature says, they first encountered who? The Arabs. Okay, another map showing his travels, started from Portugal all the way here. So this legend should show you something. The violet arrow over here indicates the voyages sponsored by Prince Henry the Navigator. Hello? Is there a question? All right. The arrows in violet or indigo show voyages or the travel sponsored by Prince Henry the Navigator. So started from somewhere in Portugal all the way to Africa, all around the side. And then Bartholomew Diaz came after him, and he traveled more closely to the land and all the way to the side. Okay. And then came Vasco da Gama, who then traveled all the way in the Green Line. Okay. All right. He avoided meeting the coast. Okay. So he traveled wide, came to Mozambique, and then traveled on to India. Now, something important happened when he was traveling, and I'm referring to Vasco da Gama. With the aid of an Indian pilot, Vasco da Gama sailed all the way across the Indian Ocean to Calicut in 23 days. So he traveled all the way from Mozambique to the Indian Ocean, okay, somewhere in India in 23 days. Now, it took him 3 months to beat back to the African coast, during which time his crews had developed what? Scurvy. So here is Mozambique. Okay. He traveled all the way from this side to this side into this distance in what, 23 days. That's less than a month. About a week lesser than a month. Now, after doing his business over there and returning back, okay, he had realized something, that the weather and the climate was terrible. He was facing what we call the monsoon winds. And so returning back, he, instead of using the same 23 days or less, he had actually used how many months? 3 months. That's about 90 days. Is that okay? And around that time, it says that his crew, the people helping him on the ships, had developed scurvy, which is the deficiency of, is it vitamin C or D, one of them. Okay. So many people had died that he had to destroy one of his 3 remaining ships. And by the time he had returned to Lisbon, the capital of Portugal, he had sailed 24,000 miles, which is close to the circumference of the earth, if you remember, in more than 2 years. And out of the 170 men he had started the journey with, only 44 had returned. So these were the things that happened to him when he was returning back from India to Africa. Okay, one was that the climate and the temperature, so the climate and the weather he was facing at that time was bad. The winds were too strong, and so they couldn't beat back in time. Now, the prolonged stay on the sea had made some people develop what they call seasickness. Seasickness, and they didn't have medicine to cure some of the diseases that they had encountered on the sea. Okay, coupled with that, so that was the second or the third reason. The first reason is that the weather. I hope you are writing some things down. The first reason was that they didn't beat back in time because of weather. The weather was bad. The weather was terrible. Upon their return, they faced bad weather conditions, which delayed their stay on the sea. As a result of their prolonged stay at sea, some people developed various types of sicknesses. Okay, and the sicknesses that they faced, they didn't have medicines to cure them. And also because they had lacked water and food. Remember, you were going and you used 23 days. Upon your return, you are now using a prolonged number of days, which means that the amount of food that you had probably budgeted for, you would have probably already consumed. Okay, which is why out of the 170 men he started with, only 44 had returned. Is that clear? All right. In 1510, the Portuguese took Goa and made the sporting. I hand this up. Barbara.
Sir, please, can you come again?
Barbara, it's like you really enjoyed your thought.
Sir, like I didn't get what you said. You said the man took 24 days to go somewhere and returned using, I didn't get that.
90
Can you
days.
come again? And what
Okay.
happened?
Okay. Let me take it again. Please pay attention. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. Now, Vasco da Gama was a navigator, okay, part of the Portuguese navigators who were commissioned in Portugal to explore, one of the first explorers. Now, he had traveled all the way to Mozambique and then on to India. On his going to India, he used 23 days. This is, once again, this is Vasco da Gama we are talking about. He used 23 days to go there. Favorable weather conditions, everything was good. In fact, he even traveled with the aid of an Indian pilot. Okay, now, when he was returning back to Africa, after he had finished conducting his business in India, okay, instead of using the same 23 days that he used previously, now he used how many days? 90 days, which is almost about 3 months. And during which time some of his crew had developed what? Scurvy, which is a deficiency of, is it vitamin D or vitamin C? One of them. Okay. Now, so many people had died that out of the number of ships that he had set out with, he had to even destroy one of them because there were not enough people on all the ships to keep them running. So he had to destroy one so that the resources can be shared among the remaining two. In addition, out of the 170 men who he had started the journey with, only 44 had returned. Out of the 170 people that he started the journey with from Portugal, only 44 people had returned. Primarily because of the delay on the sea as they had encountered upon their return from India. Okay, and the reasons I gave as to why only 44 had returned was because, one, they were faced with adverse weather conditions which delayed their stay. So instead of the 23 days that they had used in going, they now used 90 days in coming back. And because of the prolonged stay, a number of people had developed serious sicknesses to which they didn't have the medicines to cure. And so a lot of them died. Also because a number of them faced starvation because they had spent so much time at sea that they hadn't planned for. Okay, they had spent so much time at sea that they hadn't planned for. And so their food supplies had dwindled, their water supplies had also dwindled, and medicine supplies were also short. And so contributing to the reasons why out of the 170 people he started with, only 44 had returned. Are we okay, Madam Barbara?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Now, in the year 1511, they had established a base in Malacca on the strait between Malay Peninsula and Sumatra. What are they doing? Establishing strongholds, control. By 1542, they had even reached Japan. So they had traveled all the way from Europe or the Eastern, should I say Western Europe, all the way to the Far East. They didn't use, let me see if I can even project this for you to see better. Okay, so this over here is Mozambique. Okay, this is Mozambique. Now he traveled all the way from here to India, which is over here. All of this is India, as you can see over here. Okay, now, and after a while, they had even been able to get to Japan, which is somewhere around this area. Okay, they had even got to Japan, which is somewhere in the far east around this area. Let me see if I can even get the exact points of Japan for you. Yes, so this is Japan. So all the way from India, which is somewhere over here, they had been able to cross and get to Japan, which is somewhere around here. Okay, which means that they could have easily, because if they were traveling from Portugal, which is somewhere around here, they could have gone this way. Okay, they could have gone this way and still gotten to Japan, which would have been shorter for them. But they decided to go in this direction, travel all the way here to India here, and then before they were able to get towards Japan to this side. And when we move on, I'll explain to you why this was a problem as to the travels of another man called Christopher Columbus. Okay, but that was basically the travels of Vasco da Gama. Now, in 1557, they had released Macau from the Chinese. Okay, Macau, which was previously a territory under China, they had leased it. Okay, as a base from which to control the profitable trade in a wide variety of products. And to today, Macau is still in contention with China as to like being autonomous, being independent, because all of this stemmed from the Portuguese, as at the time they had leased it from the Chinese as a base. Okay, all right. So that was the travels of Vasco da Gama. Let me pause at this point and recollect what we've done so far. So we started with the reasons as to why exploration became the talk of the day or the major activity around that time, after the Dark Ages and all those things that had happened. Okay, three reasons that we gave: the zeal to get to know what was somewhere else, the spread of the Christian faith, and replenishing European stocks of precious metals and what have you. Okay, and this birthed the European travels, where for the first time they were commissioned by emperors and merchants and what have you. It started with Prince Henry the Navigator, and then came Bartholomew Diaz, and then came Vasco da Gama, who we just spoke about. Then let's move on to the geographical ideas of Christopher Columbus, one of the greatest navigators or travelers as at that time. In fact, his name has even been used to compose songs and what have you. Okay, all right. Now, Columbus was born to Spanish parents in Italy in 1451, and he started navigating at the age of 14. So quite young when he started navigation. As a young man, he served on ships in the Eastern Mediterranean in 1476, and he arrived in Portugal. In that same year, he sailed on an English ship which probably went as far as Iceland. In the year 1478, he was married and lived for a few years on the islands of Madeira in Portugal, but he never ceased to increase his knowledge of the ocean. And after his wife died, he had tried sailing to the Guinea coast for a number of times, but had failed. Now, as a traveler, was yes. So, okay, so the question is here. So, were they Apologies once again for the network interruptions. I know a number of you couldn't hear me. My network just went off suddenly. Apologies for that. As I always say, when I go off, don't panic. I'll always come back. All right. Where were we? I think. Okay. So I think we are here. Can you all hear me and see my screen clearly? All right. Now, he was a man, and by this person we are referring to Christopher Columbus. He was a man who was interested in reading, and he read at least 5 books that people know of. And one of the books was titled Imago Mundi, which is Latin for image of the world. And this was written by Cardinal Pierre Daly. And this book was important because it contained maps of different areas for sailors, for navigators. Remember what Al Ibisi was doing, okay, correcting the maps of coastal areas and the courses of rivers and what have you. There was a book that actually contained a map of all of these areas, similar to the Portolano charts, okay, written by Cardinal Pierre Daly. And Christopher Columbus used these books, okay, and in one of the books, the conclusion was reached that China was a little more than 3,000 miles west of the Canary Islands, okay, and he also read books written by Pope Pius II, who reported on the Greek and Roman concepts regarding the earth. Now, most importantly, he also read Latin translations of Ptolemy's geography. Remember all the things that Ptolemy did, all the errors that he created. Okay, Christopher Columbus used his book. And you remember one of the most important errors that Ptolemy reported on, which was the usage of Posidonius's wrongful calculation of the circumference of the earth, which means that if, and sorry, you remember what the figure that he got to? The figure he got to was what? 18,000. That was Posidonius, which meant that largely the earth was what? Small. The earth was smaller. Okay, if this was true, it means that all the calculations that they were doing at that time, any calculation of navigation that they were doing, will be based on the wrongful calculation of the circumference of the earth, which means that they would underestimate the distances. Is my network still going bad? Martin Osei? Hello, Martin. The network is bad, right?
No, sir.
It is translated.
The network is okay.
Sorry about that. Once again, we'll end it soon so that we will not complete the entire chapter 4 today. We'll end it soon so that you can have ample time to prepare for your next class. All right. So as I was saying, he also read Latin translations of Ptolemy's geography. Remember, Ptolemy's geography had a lot of errors in there. Okay, the most important of them was the wrongful calculation of the circumference by Posidonius. So you can see the level of how Posidonius actually disturbed the rest of the world from way back in his time, before the birth of Christ, even after the birth of Christ, somewhere in the 14th, 15th century, people were still using those errors. Okay. Now, he was also thoroughly familiar with the first Latin edition of Marco Polo. Remember how Marco Polo also contributed? He had also traveled to China at a point in time and wrote on what he also observed. And he was also popular. He was also with the popular favorite supposed to have been written by Sir John Mandeville. So this is an image of Christopher Columbus and an account of his travels. Now, Columbus had no doubts that the earth was round, because at that time, if indeed you were a sailor or a navigator who thought the earth was flat, I don't believe anybody will even board your ship. Okay, so at this time, it was agreed, it was accepted that the Earth was what? Spherical. However, Columbus faced two problems. Both of them were related to the distance he would have to sail westward to reach Asia. You remember the image or the image I just projected to you, showing how Vasco da Gama could have easily traveled westward to have gone to China, but they all decided to use the longer route by traveling eastward. And all of that was also relying on the wrongful calculation of the circumference by Posidonius, as reported by Ptolemy. The first was that if the circumference of the Earth were divided into 360 parts, as Hipparchus had done, if you remember, and has been common practice since his time, what was the length of one part? Okay, if 360 parts was the circle, was the division of the circle, okay, what was the length of one part? This is simple mathematics because remember, Eratosthenes had calculated the circumference of the Earth and had arrived at a figure of what? 24,860. And the person who came after him, Hipparchus, had argued that the circumference of the Earth, or a circle, which was the shape or the form of the Earth as at that time, was 360. So if 360 equaled 24,860, 1 degree will be what? So 360 degrees equals 24,000. 1 degree will be equal to what? X. So if he was able to do some small mathematics, I think he would have been able to easily arrive at the figure. But that was one of the problems that he was facing. The second problem was whose authority to believe about the eastward extensions of the known lands of the Earth. And by the eastward extensions, they are referring to what? The Far East, China, Japan, Korea, and all of those other countries. Now, a number of people had actually traveled to those places. For instance, we know of Vasco da Gama. Okay, we also know of Marco Polo or the Polo brothers. All of these people traveled there and came back with different accounts as to the travels, as to what they observed, the fact that some people over there were cannibals and what have you. So the second problem that Christopher Columbus was facing was who to believe, because all the people who went there were coming back with different explanations, different experiences, different accounts. So who should he believe, or who should he have believed, and whose experience should he have based on to make his budget, to make his estimations, and what have you? I hope you understand. Okay, if 3 of your family members have traveled to Germany and come back, one of them went and came back and told you, oh, it took me 5 hours to travel there. The second brother came back and says, oh, it took me 20 hours to travel there. The last person came back and says he used more than a month to travel there and come back. The problem will be who to believe. You get it? And so that was also part of the problem that Christopher Columbus had faced. I hope you are clear on that point as well. So at least for now, we know of the 3 main reasons why geographical explorations peaked around that time. We also know of the travels of Vasco da Gama, the problems that he faced when he was going and when he was coming, as a result of why only about 44 people remained after he had traveled, and also the travel ideas of Christopher Columbus. Now, we will continue with the 5 exploration problems. I must emphasize that this is a typical exam question, and I have seen this come in a number of exams. So pay rapt attention. If I am going off, draw my attention so that at least this particular point everybody can be able to understand. Once again, it doesn't mean that it will come in the exam. Is that okay? All right. Now, the 5 exploration problems. Now, the explorers themselves faced 5 major problems, all of which were later solved. These problems were: one, the problem of maintaining health on long sea voyages. The problem of maintaining health on long sea voyages. Now, anybody, I don't know if any of you have ever stayed in fishing communities or have stayed in coastal areas where they travel by sea before, but anybody who travels by sea frequently will tell you that the sea is a hard place to live. Okay, so for people whose systems are not yet built, you realize that people usually vomit, they develop seasickness and what have you. Okay, and so one major problem as at that time was the problem of maintaining health on long sea voyages. If you happen to travel over a long time, there are so many problems because remember, you are exposed to the weather. If it was raining, it is falling on you. If the sun was scorching, it is scorching you. Okay, you can't also drink the seawater, and the moment you do, the problems are going to be there because they are high in salt content. Okay, and so maintaining health on long sea voyages was a major problem for explorers and navigators as at that time. Also because they sometimes the amount of medicine, food, and water, even fuel, as Augustine suggested, was largely understated. Because if you are traveling, just like Vasco da Gama experience, if you are traveling and you happen to overstay on the ocean or on the sea, not because of your own doing, but because of weather conditions, okay, you realize that you stay long time and then you run out of supplies. And on the ocean, where are you going to okay, and so one of the main problems of navigation was what? Maintaining good health on long sea voyages. So you realize that many eventually settled in places that they didn't intend to settle, or they even died as a result. Exactly. Accuracy of navigation. The problem affecting the accuracy of navigation. Remember, as at that time, although the Chinese had developed the magnetic compass, not has any magnetic material could distort the reading of the magnetic compass. Remember, they to go and replenish precious metals. Unfortunately for them, some of these metals were magnetic. Okay, and so they would usually interfere with the magnetic reading, the reading of the magnetic compass. That is if they had them. Okay, on certain days as well, if you are traveling by night and you have to use the stars for navigation, you remember the stars, and it happened that it was a cloudy day or it was a cloudy night, you can't see the stars, which means that you would have to be navigating by instinct, and this could lead you to somewhere else where you don't intend to be. Was a problem.
Sir, please, your network is going off again. I can't see anything.
Not you soon.
Unfortunately, it is only when it gets to the most important part of the lecture that suddenly the network goes off. I don't understand why. Whoever is doing us, we beg you.
Yes, the witches and the wizards, they are doing that.
Whoever is doing us, we beg you. Don't we beg you. When it gets to the most important part, then the network will suddenly go off. I apologize for that sincerely, but let's go on. I think we're on the third point, the problem of making precise determinations of longitude.
Sir, please, the second point. We didn't hear anything.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. Let me take it back. So the second point reads the problem of perfecting the accuracy of navigation. Now, remember, the sailors as at that time were using winds, they were using the stars for navigation like astronomers did. Okay, much later, even before that, you realize that using of these stars and the winds, they are not reliable. You can't always be able to tell where you are going because the winds can be similar. It can be sometimes you realize that even in Ghana, it is raining, but the sun is even out. So which of the winds are you going to base on? Okay. But also remember that much later, the Chinese had developed the magnetic compass, which was an improvement in navigation. However, using of the magnetic compass also had a problem because when you have some of these precious metals, which were ferromagnetic, on board the ship, okay, the readings of the compass would be distorted. So, the magnetic compass will always point north. But if it happens that you have any other metal on board the ship that could be attracted to a magnet, it will be easy for the magnet to read a different reading. So you may intend to be heading north, but before you realize you are heading east. Okay. The third aspect of the same point, the problem of
So please, can you look at the magnetic compass again? I think I don't get it with the onboarding. I don't really understand it, please.
Okay, what I am saying is this. The usage of the magnetic compass relies on a magnet, okay, embedded in the compass to tell direction, always pointing north, okay. You also know that magnets are also always attracted to other ferromagnetic materials, which means that if you have any metal on board the magnets, if as an experiment, you can pick two magnets, okay, put them side by side. One will always, or both of them will always tend to face each other at the poles where they are attracted. Okay, if that is the case, you realize that when you have a ferromagnetic material on the ship, you could easily read a wrong reading because the magnetic reading of the compass would always tend to face another metal. I hope you are getting it. Like, it could always tend to face another metal because that is what it is naturally attracted to. And so in your mind, you are reading a wrong reading, a correct reading, but you get to a point and then you realize that you are actually in the wrong place because of the distortions of the compass. Meshach, are we okay?
Yes, perfectly understood now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thirdly, we argue about the problem of making precise determinations of latitude, as opposed to navigation on land, where at least if not for anything, you can, even on a map or on an atlas, you can see a story building. They may have a point for maybe a river body, a mountain, or something. Okay, on the ocean, you don't have anything to make reference to. And so being able to tell on which longitude you are on was a problem. I hope you understand it. In addition to that point, remember, every longitude represents 15 degrees, which is also equal to what? 1 hour. But on which of the longitudes are you on exactly? As I said, if it was on land, oh, my network is still unstable. Please bear with me. I'll end it here so that next week we can get a much better. After this particular slide, I'll end it so that we can get a much better network next week. All right. Where was I even? I was saying, if it was on land, you realize that there are relative. You can apply the concept of relative location to get. You know that there's a mountain here, there's a river body here, and all of those things will be shown on the map. But if you're on the ocean is just the ocean. As to you being able to actually say that I am on this longitude, it was a problem. Also, primarily because many of the sailors at that time didn't know how to read maps. That was a problem. They didn't know how to read maps. They could have had the maps available, yes, but being able to read the map and say that we are traveling in this direction was a problem. Just imagine there are 180 of these longitudes on either side of the Greenwich meridian. So totaling how many? 360. Which of these 360 longitudes are you standing on? That was a problem for them. So aside them facing the problem of maintaining good health on long sea travels, aside the problem of perfecting the accuracy of navigation, also because some of the maps had wrongful courses of rivers and what have you, okay, there was also a problem of they being able to actually determine the precise longitude on which they were on, because also they were constantly moving. Where are we heading to? Where are we? That was another problem. Okay. The fourth point says that the problem of showing the whole spherical surface of the Earth or large part of it on a flat piece of paper. So today that we know that the Earth is spherical, it is not flat. But we can't always have a globe on board. So there should be a way of transferring the spherical nature of the Earth onto a flat piece of paper. Unfortunately, when you try to transfer it onto a flat piece of paper, there are distortions, what we call map distortions. Okay, and that is what led to Hipparchus developing two map projections. If you remember, the stereographic map projection and the orthographic map projections. But these sailors still didn't know how to apply them. Because on paper, on land, on maps, you have a country like Russia being so big, almost even bigger than Africa. But there is no way Russia could be bigger than Africa. But if you look on maps today, that is what you will see. Okay, because places closer to the poles have to be stretched up. The fact that the Earth is spherical, it is curved, it is round, and so things that are located at the top and at the bottom, at the North Pole and the South Pole, will have to be stretched in order to fit the paper or a flat surface. Areas around the equator, for instance, we are okay because we are already in the center, so we don't have to be stretched. So whatever you see on whatever you experience in actuality is the same thing that will be seen on the map. But areas around the North Pole and the South Pole, because it converges at the top to a point, it is not flat, because it converges at a point. In order to be able to spread it or represent it on a flat piece of paper, it has to be stretched out. And many sailors and cartographers at that time were finding it difficult to be able to represent this curved surface of the Earth on a flat piece of paper. And so it gave birth to one of the major problems of navigation. Are we good at that point? All right. Now, lastly, was the problem of eliminating from the world map the many erroneous concepts of Ptolemy. As I said, or as I've already said countless times, last week and today, Ptolemy was the last of the classical geographers. Although he was a Roman geographer, he was the last of the classical geographers, which meant that all the geographic ideas prior to him, he was privy to, or he had access to them. Now, if he had reported on any of the geographers and had assumed a wrongful stance, like he did in terms of Posidonius's wrongful calculation of the circumference of the Earth, he had reported on that and had accepted it. And Much later, almost all of the Greek knowledge had been destroyed. And so the world had access to his accounts of the circumference of the earth because that was what he accepted and even wrote on. And so even when we go to the Christian era of geography, remember he says that Ptolemy became an authority on matters related to geography. If that was true, it means that all his wrongful ideas had been adapted. Now, the problem here is this. If you reject Ptolemy's contributions to geography because they are wrong, whose accounts are you going to base on? Because remember, much of what the other Greeks had written were lost. Okay, and so whose contributions to geography are you going to base on as a means of correction or an update as to what Ptolemy had already done? And so it became a problem because you couldn't eliminate. Is there a question?
Actually, I want to. That's our own message.
Sorry.
That's my last one for better. Distractions.
Okay.
I accept.
And the fact that Ptolemy had assumed a wrong stance, or he had taken certain, he had accepted certain wrongful contributions, and had written on them. He had written on them. Many of those texts were lost to the rest of the world through the crusades that were championed by the Christians. And fortunately for him, his books were written in Latin because what, he was a Christian. His books were written in Latin, which means but it survived with wrongful concepts. And so people like Christopher Columbus faced a problem in navigation. People like Vasco Ptolemy's contributions, or yes, his contributions to geography, whose account are you going to base on as a correction or as an update, an upgrade? Okay, and so it was difficult to eliminate Ptolemy's contributions to geography, which became a major problem. Class, are we okay? Yes, so these are the 5 exploration problems: maintaining health on long sea voyages, perfecting the accuracy of navigation, make the problem of making precise determination of longitude, pieces of paper, and being able to eliminate from the world map the many erroneous or wrong concepts of Claudius Ptolemy. Yes, so these are the 5 major exploration problems. I want you to take note of these problems very, very well. And I think I have done justice to them also as well. Okay, so we will end it here for today, so that when we return next week, we'll continue with what will we even continue with? We will continue with the origin of continents and oceans. Okay, Barbara, your hand is up.
So did Vasco da Gama survive the voyage?
Okay, well, I think he did, because he was more or less he was the main navigator. So I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did. Any other question? Okay. Class, thank you once again for your time this morning. I would like to once again apologize for my network, and I promise you that next week, dear, it will not happen. We will go for prayers for all those who are doing us on the platform. Mr. Boateng, your hand is up.
Yeah, so please, I would like to know the role of Amarago Vespucci, because I learned that he was the one who discovered that Columbus has discovered America.
I didn't even hear the name of the one you mentioned.
Amarago Vespucci. He was also a Portuguese.
I have not heard of him before. I'm not going to lie. I don't know everything in the world. Personally, I've not heard of him before. Okay, so I think it will be best for me to go and read about him. Possibly next week when we meet. If you remember, try and ask me about it. If I read about it, I'll let you know. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. You're welcome.
All right. All right. So, as I said, thank you very much for your time today, guys. You've been very supportive, and I appreciate your contributions as well. The slides will be sent to your course. Please, someone, I think the person has put his number on the platform. So please contact him, Mr. Joshua Marty, so that he can attend to you. Meslin, your hand is up.
Yes, sir. Sir, you made mention of some sample questions that we needed to go through.
Okay, so I'll send them in conjunction with the slides to your
The
rep. So
slides.
please, yes, make sure you get access to all of those things
Thank you.
before next week. Try and answer the questions that are also there, so that when we meet, it will be easier for us to go through them. Is that fine? Okay. Thank you very much. Enjoy your week, and please remember my New Year gift, all of you. If I don't get it, you are all dead. Okay. Have a good weekend. Bye bye.
Imano I don't know, but
Bye.
Class rep, can you add me to your group?
Class rep,
Please,
please
we want
put
to
it on the
know
general
if
group
you
so that we
are
can
welcome
all
to
have it.
repeat.
We beg you. Put them
At
on the
Joshua
general.
Martin, please, if you have the link to the group, kindly share with us so that we can also join, okay?
Please, the timetable given to us with the link for this Google meeting on it, and then the lecturer's name, the telephone number. Look under the course code and course name. There is a WhatsApp link under it. Join that WhatsApp link. I'll post everything to that WhatsApp link.
Okay.
I don't know, with my phone, I've been trying to do that several times.
In the PDF form, just copy the timetable. Yeah, Mesha, copy the timetable, copy the link. Okay, copy the link and then paste it in.
EMS. Try and remind him of the sample questions, so we beg you.
Madam, hear me crouching. Why?
Madam, say bye bye.
Hear me crouching, please. But if anything, I'll post on the general page in America, on your third page.
Yeah, I know we are all
In the
there.
timetable, now with the Maya, I want PDF mono. Go there, there's a WhatsApp link over there. Join that link.
All right. All right.
And then you will get everything over there. Thank you.
oh yeah, don't. Well,
So
Hello, class. Hello.
yes, sir.
Hello,
Yes, sir.
class. Please, I heard that he said we should join a link for a WhatsApp number. or him to share the slides. But since my light was breaking by then, I couldn't hear it well. I don't know whether you could assist me for that.
So are you on the GeoTalk platform?
You thought, yes, please. Yes, please. That one I'm there.
The general
Yes,
GeoTalk
please.
platform. Please,
Please let me check
slides are
and
there.
come back. Okay. Let me check. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello?
Please go to the general GeoTalk platform. All the slides are there.
Please, I went there. I went there. I'm not part of that platform.
So do you have the timetable containing the course code, course title, various centers, lecturer's name, lecturer's telephone number, and the meeting links?
Please, I have it.
So under the course code and course title, there is a WhatsApp link over there. Go and join that link.
Okay. Thank you.
Amen. What are there?
English, I know what I'm hearing.